Chapter 1. Eternal happiness is the goal. The world progresses by intellect. All that is great in this world is just a manifestation of the intellect. What is the goal towards which the world is moving? What is the world striving for? Careful observation will show that all are striving for happiness. From the smallest ant to the greatest emperor, everyone is tirelessly working. For what? For happiness, and happiness alone. Everyone is anxious that he or she should live in happier circumstances than those at the present. It is this anxiety which impels man to work. This craving for happiness is not wrong. It is indeed desirable. But since men are constantly endeavoring to obtain more happiness, it is evident that happiness in full has not yet been obtained. Man is constantly trying to accumulate such sources of pleasure as food, dress, house, employment, wife, and children, because he believes that happiness will be derived from these sources. But the happiness which man thus obtains is fleeting and impermanent. For a while there seems to be happiness, but then it fades away. If we analyze the various ways by which man obtains happiness, we will come to a general conclusion. The happiness so far found by him is that which has been experienced through the 5 sense organs, namely the eyes, ears, tongue, nose, and skin. Thus, down through the ages, human effort has been directed only towards acquiring objects for the satisfaction of these 5 senses. When his eyes see pleasurable things, man derives happiness. When those things vanish, he becomes gloomy. When his ears hear pleasing music or words, man is happy. When those pleasurable sounds are denied him, he sinks into sorrow. Like sight and hearing, the sensations of touch, taste, and smell are also experienced by man as either happiness or misery. Although these 5 senses seem to give happiness, they do not give it uninterruptedly. By watching too many cinema shows, the eyes become impaired. Further, since the various other pleasing sights come to an end, it is impossible for man to watch them constantly. The same is the case with the happiness experienced through the sense of hearing. How long can a man listen to a concert? Either the concert will come to its natural end, or else the individual will have to leave the place on account of some other work. Thus, there is an end to the happiness experienced through the sense of hearing. Similar is the case with the sense of smell. In fact, the continuous enjoyment of strong and pleasant odors may at length produce a headache or bleeding from the nose. Moreover, those things from which pleasant odors emanate lose them rapidly. We find the same to be true about the sense of taste. Can one stuff one's stomach beyond its capacity with even the tastiest dish? Beyond a certain limit, the tongue finds even that tastiest dish repulsive. Hence, even taste does not give permanent happiness. Let us now consider the sense of touch. When a silky, soft flower touches the body, there is a sensation of pleasure, but the flower withers away rapidly. Moreover, after a while we become accustomed to the sensation, and it ceases altogether to give us pleasure. The same is also true of a cool breeze and other such things. Hence, the pleasure experienced through the sense of touch also cannot be permanent. Therefore, the happiness acquired through any of these 5 senses cannot be enjoyed continuously. Beyond a certain limit, they may actually become sources of pain. instead of pleasure. Hence, the foregoing scrutiny can only lead us to the conclusion that the permanent and perfect happiness sought by man cannot be obtained through the five senses. It is certain that everyone wants happiness in full, untainted by even an iota of sorrow. This can in no way be denied. However, no one has so far been able to obtain such happiness by gratifying the five senses. It is thus quite clear that up until now perfect happiness has not been obtained in spite of all the world's progress and endeavors through the above-mentioned means. Yet, is such perfect happiness impossible? No, one can have it here and now. There is nothing wrong in all living beings aspiring to perennial and full happiness untainted by sorrow. The desire for happiness is not wrong. Happiness must be obtained. It is in fact the supreme goal, purushartha, for all human beings. But the means to obtain it which have been charted and followed by people up until now are wrong. The defect is only in the means and not in the goal. That is why man is not able to enjoy perfect happiness despite the Herculean efforts he has made to achieve it. The paths leading people to the perfect happiness which is desired by one and all are the religions that have come into existence on earth. Religion, mata, is the principle or path found by mind, mati. The purpose of all religions is to show mankind the best means for achieving perfect happiness. But unfortunately, nowadays, though various religions point out their own distinct roads towards this great objective, every man, regardless of his religion, is stopped on the way and is prevented from obtaining happiness on account of religious bigotry, and also of not knowing the true significance of religious tenets. With true love and faith, follow that religion in which you have belief and turn within. Do not jump outwards, criticizing and arguing against other religions on account of bigotry for your own religion. Guru Vachaka Kovai, verse 991. At this juncture, mankind needs a proper guide. Such guides, the great ones, are generally called by people avatara purushas, that is, God in human form. They are those who have achieved and are well settled in that perfect happiness, which is the goal of mankind. They ever remain effortlessly in that blissful state, and also help others to obtain it. Among those jnana gurus, the most recent one is Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, who lived as the world guru, Jagat Guru, on the southern slope of Arunachalam, the sacred hill. What did Sri Ramana Bhagavan teach the world? What is the supreme benefit which mankind can derive from his teaching? Let us see. What is the ultimate objective for which man, by means of his intellect, has been ceaselessly working in different fields of endeavor throughout so many ages? Is it not for happiness? Is it to achieve this very end that Sri Bhagavan has shown us a direct path which is his own unique discovery, and which is at the same time the quintessence of all the paths paved by those great ones who came before him? It will be found at the end of this research how his teaching is the direct path, like the hypotenuse of a right-angled triangle and an easy one to follow. Now, who is fit to follow this path to bliss which Sri Bhagavan has shown? Are the Brahmins alone fit to follow it? Or are Hindus alone qualified to follow it? Is Bhagavan Sri Ramana a guru for Hindus only? Does he propagate a particular religious faith which is already in the world, or is it an altogether new religion? such questions may arise in the mind of the reader. The path of Sri Ramana is meant for everyone who craves happiness. Is there anyone in the world who does not want happiness? Even one who denies the existence of God will not admit that he does not want happiness. Therefore, an atheist can also attain perfect happiness through the path of Sri Ramana. No human being is excluded from this path. Sri Ramana is not a preacher of any religion. He belongs to no religion or country, since he shows the way to perfect bliss, which is the common aim of the whole world. He is the Jagat Guru. And since unbound by the tenets and traditions of any religion, he teaches one and all the path to obtain the common aim, bliss eternal. He is indeed the Loka Mahaguru, the Guru for the whole world. People of all religions have come to him and have been benefited. Moreover, no matter to which religion one belongs, one feels in one's heart, Sri Ramana is the Guru of my own religion, and has devotion to him. Therefore, let us see what is the path of Sri Ramana. Chapter 2. What is happiness? O man, do you want happiness? Are you working for it, or do you at least have the desire to find a path through which you can direct your efforts? Then you are fortunate. Here is a method for your consideration. After scrutinizing it, see if you are convinced that everlasting happiness can be obtained through this way. If this method appeals to you as sound, follow it. Put forth your best efforts and enjoy in full the fruit of your toil. Listen to this exposition of the unique path to perennial bliss, which clears all the doubts that have been created in your mind by the various scriptures. So sounds the divine horn of knowledge, Jnana Murasu of Bhagavan Sri Ramana to the world. Listen, my dear maiden, the Satguru who, because of his divine compassion, came on earth in the human form of Sri Ramana, is standing on the holy hill Annamali, Arunachalam, and is sounding his divine horn of knowledge so loudly that even the heavens tremble and the real eye of all the people on earth opens. With this verse, wake you up so that you may know that he is protecting us from pitfalls and has taken us as his own. Therefore, wake up and see, and drink the nectar of his grace. Wake up, my child, never to sleep again. Sri Ramana and Bhave. O man, who is ceaselessly craving and toiling for happiness, crying, happiness, happiness, I want happiness. Do you at least know what happiness is? On many occasions in your life you have experienced happiness in many forms, have you not? Now then, can you tell me what happiness is? Those experiences through the senses that are agreeable to your mind you term as happiness, and disagreeable ones as misery, do you not? This idea of yours about happiness and misery is wrong. That is why all the methods through which you have tried to obtain happiness and avoid misery have come to naught, because the method was wrong. Happiness untainted by misery has never been within your reach. Since we say that your idea of happiness and misery is wrong, is it not necessary first to explain why it is wrong, and then to determine what happiness really is? Now listen. According to your idea, you should be happy when the objects for the satisfaction of the five senses are obtained, and miserable when they are not. But see, you are happy in your dreamless sleep. Not even a single experience through any of the five senses is present there. Yet sleep is blissful to one and all. According to you, there ought to be only misery when the five senses are not working. But in fact, it is not so. Contrary to your belief, there is happiness when the five senses are not working, that is, in the absence of body consciousness. How do you account for this? You have to admit that happiness can be experienced even without the help of the five senses. Moreover, a man or woman who has heaped all those objects which satisfy the five senses, such as wealth, fine houses, clothes, tasty food, an agreeable wife or husband, children and relatives, which alone are the means for gaining happiness according to your idea, must be the happiest person in the world, while one who has none or few of these must be miserable. However, when we see the world, it is not so. Even the richest man has his own miseries. Sometimes he cannot even have a good night's sleep. The thicker the finger, the greater the swelling. In contrast to this, you find that the penniless laborer who toils all day long, eats but a morsel in the night, and later lies on the hard pavement, enjoys a sound sleep free of all worries. There is still a more important point to be noted here. In deep sleep, even the rich man is totally dissociated from his external sources of pleasure, and despite this dissociation, he is quite happy. Therefore, you must accept the fact that happiness is something which can shine, even without the aid of the five senses. Furthermore, as happiness is experienced by you in deep sleep, where there is neither body consciousness nor awareness of the world, it follows that happiness must be within you and not outside. Now you clearly know that you were wrong all along in your thinking that happiness comes from external objects. Every object in this world, including your own body, is extraneous to you, and that is why they are forgotten in deep sleep. Yet since everyone experiences perfect happiness in that state, the only possible conclusion is that happiness does lie within you. The truth is that you yourself are happiness. Happiness is your true nature. You are not this body form. You are full and perfect bliss itself. We can reach this same conclusion through another way also. Listen. Do you not like innumerable things? Just analyze each and everything which is dear to you. When you do, you will find that you love only those things from which you think you get happiness. Where there is happiness, there is love. This is the universal law, a law which has no exception. Now, in order to proceed according to this law, tell me which thing you love the most. You will have to admit that you truly love yourself best, far more than you love your friends, relatives, wife or husband, children, father, mother, riches, and so on. You love them because you think that they contribute to your own happiness. If anything happens proving to you that they give happiness to someone else instead of to yourself, your love for them will at once vanish. Therefore, it is clear that you love other things only because you love yourself. We hear some people saying, "My love is not for myself. I work in this world not for my own happiness, but for the welfare of other people. In fact, I live for others. To care only for my own happiness is selfishness. That is not my aim. My aim is the happiness of others." This is superficial talk, betraying a lack of sincere and serious analysis. People do not realize that every so-called selfless act which they do brings happiness only to themselves. Let us take the example of a man who is prepared to undergo throughout his lifetime all kinds of sufferings for his son just to maintain educate, and keep him above needs and wants. In doing so, it is he alone who gets satisfaction from seeing the prosperity of his son. He worked for this satisfaction alone. Is not this satisfaction his own? Is not this self-satisfaction the driving force behind all his so-called selfless work? The former American president, Abraham Lincoln, once saved a pig by lifting it out of the mire in which it was caught. And while doing so, his body and clothes became very dirty. The onlookers asked him why he, the president of such a vast country, should dirty himself just to save a common pig. He replied, "I got involved in this action not so much to relieve the suffering of the pig, but to relieve myself from the suffering I experienced at the sight of the pig. I did this only for my own peace of mind." What Lincoln said then is the practical truth of the matter. It is only this self-satisfaction, one's own happiness, which is the hidden motive behind all kinds of selfless acts. This can in no way be denied. Just as the sacrifice made for the sake of my children and my relatives turns out to be selfishness because it is caused by the love towards oneself, so the love towards my own country, desabhimana, and the love towards my own language, basabhimana, also turn out, in an indirect way, to be mere selfishness because they are rooted in the love towards one's body as I, dehabhimana. What must be noted here is the I, which is inherent in the mind. He who rises saying, "I will sacrifice even my life so that my language may flourish," does so on account of his love towards himself. In the same manner, since even he who sacrifices his life for the sake of his country is aiming only for his own satisfaction, he also does so on account of self-love. There are some who boast of their broad internationalism in contrast to narrow nationalism. They may say, "I am not so selfish as to be concerned only for my country or my home. I want the whole world to be happy. My aim is not the benefit of any particular language or country. Is this not unselfishness?" Yet even this belongs to the same category. This man also gets peace only when he sees the world in peace, and thus what he desires is his own peace or happiness. It is therefore clear that even this hero of so-called unselfishness has love for his own self. This indeed is self-love. Therefore, the law that everyone loves himself most is irrefutable. Thus, you have to conclude that of all things the dearest to you is yourself. According to these two conclusions, 1, that you are your dearest of all, and 2, that love can spring forth only towards happiness, it is clear that you must be eternal happiness, paramasukham itself. Where there is happiness, there is love. Since you love yourself best, you are eternal happiness itself. Thus, do we not once again come to the same conclusion? It is this happiness, your own nature, that was experienced by you in deep sleep. The reason for your own happiness in deep sleep, even without the aid of your mind and its instruments, the 5 senses, is that happiness is your real nature. In fact, you yourself are happiness. Here you may ask, are not the experiences gained during the waking state through the 5 senses happiness? Scrutinize more deeply. You should investigate with a keen attention each one of your pleasurable experiences as to what changes take place within you at that time. Let us take an example. Suppose you want to eat a sweetmeat. As soon as this thought arises in you, you start working to acquire all the necessary ingredients to making that sweetmeat. You prepare it and start eating it. Now happiness is experienced. If you analyze how this happiness is obtained, that is, if you watch the feeling of happiness that rises within you while eating, you will find that the thought waves which had arisen out of the desire for the sweetmeat, I want a sweetmeat, and which had been raging so far cease. Now the thought waves cease, but only for a while. Hence the happiness is also experienced only for a while. When the sweetmeat has been eaten, the thought waves rise again, and so the happiness disappears. Some may argue a sweetmeat is sweet. That is why it gives happiness, and not because of the cessation of thoughts. The reason for happiness is the sweetness in the sweetmeat. But this is wrong. It is a conclusion lacking sufficient analysis. Let us see how. The tongue, the organ of taste, can only discern which thing has what taste. Sugar candy is sweet, neem is bitter, tamarind is sour, salt is salty, and so on. But it is only the mind that decides likes and dislikes. I want this taste and not that one. Though a thing is bitter, if the mind wants it, it will derive happiness in that bitterness. Are there not some people who hate sweets and have a peculiar craving for bitter things? In the same manner, are there not some who relish dried fish, while others will run miles to escape from the very smell of it? Moreover, though one is eating the tastiest and choicest dish in the world, one's mind may be so engrossed at that time in some other thoughts that it is unable to create thoughts of desire for that tasty food, and consequently one is unable either to know its taste or to derive happiness from it. Similarly, when the mind is centered elsewhere, one can eat even a tasteless dish without aversion. Further, when one is hungry and the desire for food is strong, one eats and happily relishes even the worst and most tasteless preparation. What can we infer from all this? It is not the taste, but only the thought waves of the mind in the form of likes and dislikes which account for one's happiness and misery. When the fire of a ravenous hunger is raging, even a stale gruel or sour soup of wild rice flour will be relished as the best dish in the world. Therefore, it is not the nature of the sense object, but only the desire for it which is the cause of happiness. Guru Vachaka Kovai. Thus, if the thought wave that rises is one of dislike for a thing of a particular taste, the removal of that thing will calm down the thought wave, and thus the mind will subside. Hence happiness, which is your real nature, is then revealed. If the thought wave is one of a liking for a thing of a particular taste, when you get that thing, the thought wave will calm down, and the mind will subside. Hence, here again, happiness is revealed. Therefore, it will be clear to those who keenly observe that happiness is experienced only by quietening the thoughts which rise again and again. It does not matter whether a sweet thing is sweet or bitter. The rising of thought waves in the form of likes and dislikes for things alone is sorrow, and their subsidence alone is happiness. That is all. Eating a sweetmeat concerns only the sense of taste. The same process described above also takes place in the case of the other four senses: touch, sight, smell, and hearing. In deep sleep, too, thoughts become quiescent temporarily, hence happiness is experienced. Waking is the rising of thoughts, that is, the rising of the first thought, I am this body. When waking comes, the happiness of deep sleep vanishes. What is to be inferred from this? Thoughts are the enemy of happiness. Happiness reigns when thoughts subside. In fact, thoughts are the veil that covers over the happiness. When this veil is removed, happiness is revealed. Since you, yourself, are happiness, all you have to do to enjoy your own innate happiness is to ward off all thoughts. So understand this truth, that the happiness enjoyed by you in deep sleep on account of its thought-free nature can also be enjoyed in a thought-free waking state. The mind runs outwards because of the ignorant outlook that happiness is derived from external objects. If the mind is thoroughly and firmly convinced through the above scrutiny that happiness is within and that one's real nature is itself happiness, it will not then run outwards but towards oneself. In other words, it will remain still in self. This knowledge is sine qua non for effectively controlling the mind. When you eat a sweetmeat, the thought wave in the form of a liking for it subsides and you enjoy happiness already within you. Is it not so? However, not understanding that you enjoy only that happiness which is already within you, you delude yourself into thinking that it comes from the sweetmeat. That is why you make repeated efforts to acquire and eat more and more sweetmeats. But beyond a certain limit, sweetmeats become like poison, upsetting your stomach and making you sick. The same is the case with the other four sense pleasures. Listen to this story. A dog went to the cremation ground. It picked up a sharp piece of bone from which the flesh had been completely burned off and started munching it. The sharp edges of the bone pierced the dog's mouth in many places, and there was bleeding. The dog dropped it, but seeing blood smeared all over it, it thought that the blood was coming from the bone because of its ravenous munching. It licked the blood and again started chewing the bone even more ravenously, with the result that there were more wounds in its mouth and more bleeding. The foolish dog went on repeating this process of dropping the bone, licking the blood, and again chewing the bone. Little did that foolish dog realize that in fact the blood came from its own mouth and not from the bone. A foolish dog picked up a bone, bereft of flesh because 'twas burnt, masticated many around till its mouth was filled with wounds, licked and praised the blood its own. No thing on earth equals this bone. Guru Vachaka Kovai, verse 585. Similarly, when a man enjoys external objects, he only experiences a little of the happiness that is already within him. But on account of ignorance, he thinks that the happiness comes from the external objects, and thus he behaves like the dog in the story. Exactly like the dog that munched the bone again and again, throughout his life, man repeatedly searches for and accumulates external objects. What is the result of all this? Alas, untold heaps of misery, with a few iotas of pleasure in between. That is all. Indeed, all this is ignorance, otherwise called Maya. All the researches and efforts of mankind from the Stone Age to the modern atomic age in different fields of endeavor, be they intellectual, scientific, or social, are they not all similar to the efforts of the dog which untiringly munches the bone? Do not feel offended by this statement, which may seem to be a sweeping one, for when told without reserve, this is the plain truth. Tell me, what indeed has mankind done in the name of progress so far other than improving and accumulating external objects for the satisfaction of the five senses? All the aforesaid human efforts are based upon nothing but the wrong assumption that happiness comes from external objects. Is there any difference between the dog which thinks that more blood will come out of the dry bone the more it is munched, and the man who thinks that humanity will be made increasingly happy by accumulating more and more external objects through the improvements of scientific and industrial progress? Certainly not. Thus, not knowing the right path for obtaining everlasting happiness, humanity has gone too far and is racing still further in the wrong direction. There is no wrong in man's love for happiness. It is his birthright. It is in fact the birthright of all living beings. Thus happiness should be obtained and never be suppressed. But do not toil to achieve objects of worldly pleasure which give only an iota of fleeting happiness. Direct all your efforts only towards obtaining happiness in full. By desiring petty external objects, you get only a transient and limited happiness. Therefore, be not a person of petty desire. Be a person of full desire. Until perfect happiness is obtained, do not give up your efforts. Know the way to experience always and uninterruptedly that happiness, Ananda, which is you, and which exists, Sat, and shines, Chit, within you, as your real nature. This is the goal supreme, Purushartha, the very purpose for which you were born. Chapter 3. Self-enquiry is the only way to happiness. From what has been said, it follows that I am, self, is happiness. Now then, how are we to obtain that happiness? Further, how to enjoy it permanently? Where thoughts cease, happiness reigns supreme. Such is the truth about happiness. Although the thought-free state is gained and happiness is experienced for a while, such a thought-free state obtained by contact with external objects does not last long. Therefore, it is clear that one can never achieve the thought-free happy state permanently with the help of the five senses. Have we not already seen that deep sleep is a happy state? So is this deep sleep, after all, the goal of mankind? It cannot be, because it is also short-lived and its happiness is interrupted by the waking state that follows in its trail. No one can go on sleeping forever. One's accumulated tendencies, vasanas, in the form of thoughts will rouse one from sleep. The mind, in association with the body, works without stop all day long. At the end of such a hard day's work, it, the mind, needs rest simply to be able to start afresh and work again. That is why the mind, which is a collective name for thoughts, subsides of its own accord in deep sleep. The mind, which now takes rest temporarily, cannot but enthusiastically jump out again into activity. If on his way home a man is caught in a downpour and takes shelter under the portico of some house, it does not mean that he will remain there permanently. When the shower is over, he will surely move on. Similarly, the mind gets a little rest, it sleeps. The state of activity in which it comes out again may be called either waking or dream. Thus, no one can remain in sleep forever, and so even sleep is only a temporary happiness. This state, which is called sleep, and which is a state between two vrittis, that is, two thoughts or two active states of mind, has still another defect. During sleep, the mind knowledge subsides in darkness and does not know its original light. Sat-chit, existence, consciousness, whereas it should be made to merge without losing hold of its consciousness. Therefore, sleep is not a state of perfect happiness, free from defects, then what is the way to experience such happiness? Let us turn to the words of Sri Bhagavan. Absorption of mind is of two kinds: laya, temporary stillness, and nasa, permanent destruction. That which is absorbed merely in laya will rise again. But if its form dies in nasa, it will not rise again. Upadesa Undhiyar, verse 13. There are two kinds of absorption of mind. If the absorption is temporary, it is called manolaya. That is mental quiescence. If the mind is absorbed in laya, it will rise up again in due course. The second kind of absorption is manonasa, that is, destruction of the mind. In this kind of absorption, the mind dies, and under no circumstances will it revive. Since it is dead, it can no longer give rise to misery. Therefore, the happiness obtained through the second kind of absorption, the destruction of the mind, is eternal. It is the supreme bliss. In the waking state, we enjoy agreeable experiences through the five senses. There is quiescence of the mind for an extremely short period of time. In sleep, the period of the mind's quiescence is a little longer. In death also, the mind is likewise quiescent only. All these are only quiescence of the mind, manolaya, and not the destruction of the mind, manolasa. It is not enough if misery, i.e., mind, is temporarily absorbed. It must be destroyed. This is the goal of mankind. Temporary quiescence, laya, of the mind is temporary quiescence of misery, and permanent destruction, nasa, of the mind is permanent destruction of misery. That is, the mind itself is misery. Hence, let us find what is to be done to destroy the mind. What is mind? The verdict given by Sri Bhagavan is, the mind is only thoughts. Upadesa Undhiyar, verse 18. If we give up all thoughts and absorb what is mind, we will find that there is no such thing as mind at all. If one inquires without inadvertence, pramada, into the form of the mind, it will be found that there is no such thing as mind. This is the direct path for all. Upadesa Undhiyar, verse 17. For destroying the mind, it is enough if thoughts are destroyed. Let us therefore find out what thoughts actually are. This scrutiny is not an idle way of passing time. Is not the entire world struggling for happiness? Even this scrutiny is undertaken in view of obtaining that same happiness. Then what is the difference between the efforts of humanity in general and this effort undertaken by a spiritual aspirant? The efforts of worldly people lead only to a fleeting semblance of happiness, whereas this effort of an aspirant, self-enquiry, paves the path to perfect, eternal, and unlimited happiness. Therefore, this research is far more important and worthy than all other kinds of human endeavor. Throughout this scrutiny, one must be very vigilant and put forth one's very best efforts. Only then will the results of one's inquiry, the supreme gain of life, be obtained here and now. This is a truth well proved by Bhagavan Sri Ramana's own experience. Did we not begin with a proposal to scrutinize thoughts? For what reason? The aim is to destroy all thoughts and thereby to enjoy perfect happiness. Millions of thoughts rise in us, out of which we must search for and discover the first and root thought. When we do so, we will find that the first person thought, I am this body, which rises as soon as one wakes up from sleep, is the first thought. This I thought is the root of all thoughts. The mind is only thoughts. Of all thoughts, the thought I is indeed the root thought. Therefore, what is called mind is only the thought I, i.e., the feeling, I am the body. Upadesa Undinyar, verse 18. Of the three persons, the first person, I, the second person, you, and the third person, he, she, it, etc. I, the first person, is the first to rise. If the first person does not rise, the second and third persons will not come into existence. The first person is nothing but the thought I, and this alone is mind. The second and third persons will rise only after the rising of the first person I. The world is nothing but second and third persons. In sleep, the first person feeling, I am the body, does not exist. That is why the world, the second and third persons, does not exist there. Only if that person, the ego, in the form of I am the body exists, will the second and third persons also exist. Uladu Narpadu, verse 14. If there is no I thought, no other thing will exist. Sri Arunachala Ashtakam, verse 7. If the I thought, the root of all thoughts, is prevented from rising, all other thoughts will also be prevented. If a man wants to cut down the millions of leaves and hundreds of branches of a tree, is it not enough if he cuts down the trunk? Similarly, a man who is trying to destroy all the millions and millions of thoughts will have succeeded in doing so, if he destroys the I thought, their root. Did we not start with the objective of scrutinizing thoughts? From what we have seen above, it is now clear that it is not necessary to scrutinize each and every thought, and that a scrutiny of only the I thought, the root of all thoughts, is quite sufficient. Some may ask, will not happiness be obtained through the destruction of thoughts? If so, why should any thought be scrutinized? Is it not futile? They may even quote Bhagavan Sri Ramana, who once said, "In who am I?" It is useless to scrutinize the garbage, all of which is to be thrown away in one stroke. Such an ill-fitting question would be due to an improper understanding of Sri Bhagavan's teachings. Let us see how. What Sri Bhagavan said is, it is futile to scrutinize the various properties of all the principles, second and third persons non-self, which are veiling self. No matter how much we scrutinize thoughts pertaining to second and third persons, they will never subside, but will only increase. He has never said that the scrutiny of the first person, i.e. self-enquiry, should be given up. The first person thought, I, has this peculiar property if, by inquiring, who am I, attention is focused on it in order to discover what it is, this I thought will subside. But on the contrary, the more we attend to thoughts pertaining to the second and third persons, the more they will increase. In a cinema theater, the further the screen is moved from the projector, the bigger the pictures become, and the closer the screen is moved towards the projector, the source of light, the smaller the pictures become, even to the size of a mere dot. Similarly, the more the attention of the mind is directed towards second and third persons, the more the world pictures, i.e. thoughts, are multiplied. But if the attention is turned towards self, the source of the mind's light, The mind, i.e. the first thought, I, itself will subside. We shall see into this more deeply in Chapter 8, the technique of self-enquiry. The thought, I am this body of flesh and blood, is the one thread on which are strung the various other thoughts. Therefore, if we turn inwards, where is this I? All thoughts, including the I thought, will come to an end, and self-knowledge will then spontaneously shine forth within the cave, the heart, as I. Atma Vidya Kirtanam, verse 2. Just as all the beads of a rosary fall down when the thread is cut, so also, if we want to destroy all thoughts, scrutinize the first-person thought I, which runs through and sustains all the second and third-person thoughts, like the thread through the beads. All of them will be effortlessly destroyed. When the first person ceases to exist through one's inquiry into the truth of that first person, then the existence of the second and third persons will come to an end. Uladu Narpadu, verse 14. Thus, the method of destroying I thought is also the method which will destroy all thoughts. Therefore, what is essential is to destroy the first thought, I. The only way to destroy it is to scrutinize its nature. There is no other way. How else to attain that state wherein I, the ego, does not rise, the state of egolessness, unless we seek the source whence I rises? Uladu Narpadu, verse 27. Even in the path of self-surrender, which is the path of devotion, bhakti, the destruction of the first person, the thought I, is achieved by surrendering it to God, having come to know the worthlessness of its nature, either by knowing that the ego, I, is non-existent, or by knowing that self, the real I, is the sole existence. Thus, all that is necessary is to inquire into the first person I thought alone. We shall see in Chapter 7, Self-enquiry, how it is destroyed by means of inquiry. Chapter 4, Who am I? What is this I? In other words, who am I? Do we not generally say I? What do we refer to when we say so? If we are asked what we mean when we say the word I, we shall have to admit that we have not yet found the correct answer to this question. Why? Because whenever we say why, we refer only to our body. Is not a name given to the body? We generally take that name as the name of that particular person. If that person is asked, "Who are you?" he replies, "I am Rama." If someone calls Rama, only that person looks back. Since other bodies have other names, only this body is taken to be as Rama. Therefore the name denotes the body. Because he believes that he is the body, he feels that he is Rama and no one else. Are there not many more occasions in which we behave as if we were only this body? Therefore it is clear that each one of us is convinced that the body is I. But if we approach a person, point out his hand, and ask, "What is this?" quick comes the reply, "This is my hand." Similarly, when we ask about each part of his body, he says, "This is my leg, this is my stomach, this is my chest, this is my back, this is my head," and so on and so forth. Thus, he will ultimately have to admit this whole body is mine. When he says that it is his body, it now becomes evident that the body is just a possession of his, that is, that he is the possessor of a possession, the body. If so, can he be the body, his possession? is he not the possessor of it? If he is further questioned, if this body is your only possession, who are you, its possessor? Can you be this body? Can a possession be its own possessor? He now admits that he is not the body, but that the body is merely his possession. The same person who a short while ago, when addressed by the name of his body, claimed, "I am indeed this body," now himself admits, "I am not this body. It is only my possession." In the same manner, he also refers to his mind. "My thoughts are like this, my mind is like that." Therefore, how can he be either the mind or the body, which are only his possessions? What do we learn from all this? No one yet knows what he really is. Man, who is still endowed, being unable to know what he really is, even though he is the nearest and dearest to himself, is trying hard to know so many faraway things in the world. Nothing could be more ridiculous. When even the knowledge of his own self is full of confusion and unsolved doubts, is there any wonder that his knowledge about various other things, world and God, acquired by the mind through study, hearing, and experience, is all riddled with doubts? How can a man who does not know even the color of the glasses he is wearing decide the correct color of other things by looking through those colored glasses? Similarly, however learned, rich, or powerful he may be, if a man has no clear knowledge of what he really is, all this learning, greatness, and power are merely fictitious. Hence, the first lesson to be learnt is about one's own self. Let us therefore pursue the inquiry, who am I? Although some people will accept from the scrutiny made above that they cannot be this insentient body, yet since they are not able to know correctly the true nature of I, they still think that I is the sum total of the body, the five senses, mind and breath, prana. Therefore we must clearly know what this I is, without the slightest doubt or wrong identification. That is, without mistaking one thing to be another. It is not enough if one accepts that one is not the body, a mere mass of flesh. By observing the processes of breathing and blood circulation, which continue even though the body is lying down quietly, some may think that the prana is perhaps I. Is there any test that we can use to determine a particular thing as not I? Yes, there is. The test is to find out, do we exist or not in the absence of that particular thing? By using this test, we can proceed successively to the very end of our inquiry. The wrong identification, I am the body, is itself all of these: mind, manas, intellect, buddhi, the storehouse of tendencies, chittam, ego, ahankara, wrong knowledge, ajnana, nescience, sunya, maya, and so on. The prana is a gross form of this mind, and so is the physical body. Even the mind is a body, but a subtle one. Prana is a little grosser than mind, and the body of flesh and blood is still grosser than the prana. The subtle mind in its subtler form is itself the tendencies, vasanas, or the darkness of ignorance. Let us classify all these forms of the mind into three categories, namely the gross, subtle, and causal bodies. All the gross forms, the body, blood circulation, and respiration, which are cognized by the mind through the five senses, constitute the gross body. This is because all these are clearly cognized by the mind, the subtle body, which is the second in our classification. Though the Shastras usually include pranayama kosa, in the category of subtle body. We have here included it in the category of gross body because it is clearly perceived by the mind as an object other than the mind. And since this will help us a great deal in applying our test. Moreover, since all these 5 sheaths are finally to be discarded as not I, non-self, no man with a little common sense will object to its being included with either of those 2 bodies. Now, by using the simple test mentioned above, let us see if we are this gross body. In deep sleep, we are not conscious of this gross body. What do we infer from this? Is it not obvious that we can exist without this mass of flesh? Some used to argue with Sri Bhagavan. The body does not cease to exist in deep sleep, although in deep sleep a man may not be conscious of the existence of the body, nor of the movements of the breath and blood circulation in it, yet these are perceived by others who are awake. But the verdict of Sri Bhagavan, the truth knower, Mahanubhavi, is quite contrary to this. According to him, in deep sleep the body and the world do not exist, yet one's own existence, I am, is experienced by one and all. The picture, that is, the body and world, rises only when the mind rises, exists only so long as the mind exists, and vanishes when the mind sets. Therefore, is there a world apart from the mind? Since the microcosm is the macrocosm, the body is the world. Without the body, the world does not exist. All that exists as the world is projected from the body. That is why Sri Bhagavan asked in verse 5 of Uladu Narpadu, is there anyone who without the body has seen the world? In short, the contention of worldly people, ajnanis, is the body and world do exist in sleep, whereas the consciousness I does not exist there. But Sri Bhagavan's verdict is quite the contrary. The body and world do not exist in deep sleep, whereas the consciousness I am is experienced by all. Now, does the body really exist in deep sleep? For if the body exists in deep sleep, the world must also exist there. Since the body cannot exist unless the mind rises, how can it exist in deep sleep, where the mind does not rise? And since the body does not exist in deep sleep, how then can the world exist there? Therefore, let us try to understand Sri Bhagavan's verdict that the body and world do not exist in deep sleep. If we say that a thing exists, that existence must be coupled with consciousness, that is, it should itself know its own existence. It should not need the evidence or help of any other thing either to know its existence or to prove its existence. For existence and the knowledge of existing, that is, existence and consciousness, sat and chit, are not 2 different things. To know existence, sat, is no consciousness, chit, other than existence itself. Existence is therefore consciousness. Upadesa Unhiyar, verse 23. Thus, consciousness without existence is not at all consciousness. Likewise, existence without consciousness is not at all existence. The knowledge that we slept is the evidence of our existence at that time. Do we have to ask others to know whether we slept or not? Since it is we alone who have the knowledge that we have slept, does not this very knowledge prove that we did exist in deep sleep? When our existence and consciousness, sat-chit, in deep sleep is thus undeniable, if the body and world also had such an undeniable existence and consciousness, why do they, body and world, need the evidence of others to prove their existence in deep sleep. Because the evidence of others is needed to prove that the body and world exist during deep sleep, is it not clear that their existence is not self-evident? Since we have proved that an existence without consciousness is no existence at all, and since the knowledge that the body and world exist in deep sleep is not self-evident, we can positively assert that their existence is false. Therefore, let us conclude that the body and world do not exist in deep sleep. Thus, because no one can deny that he existed in sleep, one's own existence in sleep and the non-existence of the body there must be accepted by all. Many, because of their lack of maturity of understanding when first visiting Sri Bhagavan and scrutinizing the nature of reality as exposed by him, and as explained above, were not able to grasp the fact and be convinced that existence, sat, and consciousness, chit, are one and the same, and therefore were repeatedly arguing with him. On the other hand, some who had discrimination and a sharp, clear intellect, not already confused by a mere study of the Shastras without any practice, were fully convinced as soon as they heard Sri Bhagavan's exposition that the body and world do not exist in deep sleep, that it alone is right. Therefore they were able to proceed along the path of inquiry. But those who did not have the maturity of intellect to be able to accept the non-existence of the body and world in deep sleep were stopped and could progress no further on the path. Knowing well that an aspirant cannot know, I am not the body, deham naham, and thereby give up his attachment to it unless he is fully convinced by his own experience, I can exist even without the body, Sri Bhagavan, while proclaiming the clarion call of Vedanta, deham naham koham soham, says in Tamil, in his own words of grace, the body, deham, is insentient, like an earthen pot, since it does not have the consciousness I, and since our existence is experienced as I am, daily in deep sleep, where the body does not exist, it is not I, naham. Uladu narpadu anubandham, verse 10. Yet some devotees of Sri Bhagavan often retort, the Sanskrit original of this verse says, apeta supti samaye, which means that in deep sleep the body is merely absent, removed, or unmanifest. Does this not mean that we need not accept the total non-existence of the body in sleep? Unless the aspirant's mind is well saturated with the conviction that there is no body at all in sleep, it will be given the chance to imagine that in sleep things other than I, consciousness, namely the body and world, exist at least in some subtle form, and that in future they may evolve into some very magnificent forms. Only when this chance is given to the mind will it have room to form such meaningless theories as immortalizing the body, divinizing humanity, and heavenizing the world. Therefore, in order to clear the doubts of these aspirants, it becomes necessary to relate the following incident. The original Sanskrit verse composed by Sri Bhagavan in 1927 was as follows, in which the precise word he used was abhava, but a devotee, Kavya Kanta Kanapi Shastri, perhaps on account of his then inability to accept the non-existence of the body in deep sleep, and believing that the body is not totally non-existent, but that it still exists in deep sleep, at least in an unmanifest apeta condition, changed the text to apeta supti samaye. The experience of Sri Bhagavan is it does not exist, abhava. It does exist at least in an apeta condition, is maybe this devotee's opinion. While translating the same verse in Tamil, Sri Bhagavan has used the Tamil words jadalamil, which means that the body does not exist at all. If Sri Bhagavan had agreed with the idea conveyed by the substitution, he would have translated it accordingly. But he has confirmed his own idea, ai abhava, by translating only the word used in his original Sanskrit composition. The Sanskrit version, which is now in print in all books other than Sri Ramana Hiridayam, is only the substitution of the devotee and not the original of Sri Bhagavan. It is only by way of concession to the weakness of immature minds who believe that the body and world truly exist that the Shastras pacify them by saying, the creation, the body and world, once came out of God or self, Atman. It resolves into him during sleep, death and dissolution, pralaya, and comes out again. However, these pacifying words are not the absolute truth, paramartika satya, and hence they cannot give full satisfaction to us who are longing for and trying to know only the absolute truth. These explanations of the Shastras do not stand before the personal experience of Bhagavan Sri Ramana, the Mahaguru, who never withheld even in the least the absolute truth from anyone. Therefore, we need not take them to be his direct teaching. The same idea has been well expressed in the following verse by Sri Muruganar, the foremost disciple of Sri Bhagavan. Although Guru Ramana taught various doctrines according to the level of understanding of those who came to him, we heard from him that ajata alone is truly his own experience. Thus should you know. Guru Vachaka Kovai, verse 100. Since we exist during sleep, when the body does not exist, we have to conclude according to the basic test framed previously that we cannot be the gross body, the physical body, breath, and blood circulation. Let us now consider the subtle body. Mind, which is thoughts, and intellect constitute this subtle body. We know that mind is just a collection of thoughts. Even in the waking state, do we not sometimes have, without effort, moments of quietude when all thoughts subside? Do we cease to exist during those thought-free periods? No. Even then we do exist. However, we hear some people complain, the whole of my waking state is full of nothing but waves and waves of thoughts, and I have never experienced the subsidence of thoughts at all. Very well. It is right to welcome and reply to their complaint. The periods in which the waves of thoughts subside of their own accord in the waking state are the state of being still, summa irutal, or self-abidance, nishta. Aspirants who have had this experience can easily grasp the truth. We can and do exist even in the absence of thoughts. Yet for the sake of those who have complained, let us scrutinize deeper. Have we not already said that all the thoughts which arise from sleep, the first-person thought, I am the body, is the first. All other thoughts, which pertain to second and third-person objects, multiply only by catching hold of this first thought. Even for those whose thoughts do not subside in the waking state, do not all thoughts vanish when sleep overtakes them, since the first thought, I am the body itself, subsides at that time? Thus, does not every one of us have access to the thought-free state in dreamless sleep? There we are non-existent. Even in sleep, where there is no ego I, we are not non-existent. Upadesa Unhiyar, verse 21, says Sri Bhagavan. So according to our basic test, since we exist even in the absence of the mind, we are not the mind. Further, in the same manner as I am the body consciousness, the Atma Buddhi clings to the gross body as I, it can also cling in a subtle way to many other bodies. For instance, when the gross body is inactive, is not the mind working? Dream is one such case. It is an example of our taking a subtle body. During dream, the mind, as if it had taken another gross body, functions and knows many things through that body. This dream body is simply a mental projection. It is nothing but the mind itself. So it can also be called the subtle body. But do we not exist in dreamless sleep? Therefore, since we can exist even without this dream body, we can clearly understand that it is not I. We should not think that the mind thus functions with a subtle body only in dream, but in the waking state. Do we not daydream? At that time also the same phenomenon takes place. Suppose we sit, not sleeping, and imagine that we travel to a far-off country, meet a friend there, talk with him, and undergo all the ups and downs of life. At that time, the body with which we seem to go, come, talk, and so on, is also a subtle body of ours. We know that these subtle bodies which we thus take now and then are transient. When we wake up from dream, the dream body is gone. In the same manner, the body assumed in daydream also becomes false, non-existent. That is, these bodies are false forms which come on us and go. Thus we can conclude that we exist even in the absence of these bodies. Therefore they are not we. Now, if we scrutinize further, we will find that we have another kind of body even subtler than the subtle body. Here also, to support this, each one of us has his own experience, namely, dreamless sleep. At that time we have neither the gross nor subtle body. The mind having completely subsided, we sink at rest in total darkness, knowing nothing. When the mind rises again in this darkness, either dream or waking results. When we wake up from deep sleep, we remember our experience thus: I slept happily and did not have any dream. That is, we know that we existed, even in that state of seeming darkness in which there was not even a dream. That dark state is called the causal body. We who know that we knew that we existed there is the real I. In deep sleep, the ego, ahankara, the mind in the form of attachments, is still alive in the very subtle form of tendencies, vasanas. It is this form which is that base and cause for the rising of subtle and gross bodies, and therefore it is called the causal body. Even in death, it is in this causal body that we exist. This causal body is not destroyed by the death of the gross body. The reason for asserting that even this causal body is not I is that we exist there to know even that state to be alien to us. There, our existence alone is real, and we cannot be the form, darkness, or ignorance which we assume there. Just as we rejected the gross body of the waking state as I am not this body, even though it appeared to be I, just as for the same reason we rejected the subtle body of the dream state as not I, let us now also reject this causal body, darkness or ignorance, of deep sleep as not I, since it is only a form which comes on us and goes. Therefore, having firmly eliminated all these three bodies as not I, what then remains? That knowledge, the consciousness chit of our existence, Sat, alone is I. Can we eliminate these three bodies? Certainly we can, because they are only our sheaths and are extraneous to us. From what is extraneous to us we can separate ourselves. It is within our ability. Only when we thus separate ourselves from these sheaths, which are extraneous to us, will we know our true nature. According to the truth which we have already established, namely that our true nature itself is happiness, knowing our true nature is itself experiencing perfect happiness. Thus the experience of self-knowledge, Atma Swarupanubhava, is the pinnacle of happiness. It is the ultimate goal for which all living beings are knowingly or unknowingly searching through all their innumerable endeavors, attaining, through the inquiry, who am I, the knowledge chit of our reality, Sat, as the perfect happiness Ananda is the supreme goal of mankind. The sole cause of all miseries is the mistake of veiling ourselves by imagining these sheaths to be ourself, even though we are ever this existence consciousness bliss, Sat Chit Ananda.